Large-Scale Solar Association, the Solar Alliance, and a broad coalition of environmental groups. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on this important legislation.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members request permission to ask a question of the floor manager.
Without objection.
I'm struggling to understand the in-state and out-of-state renewable generation, providing that some of the out-of-state renewable generation will be allowable as follows. And basically, after 2016, at least 75% of renewable generation from contracts executed after 2010 must be in-state or nearby. And it has a kind of a complex definition of what that means, including the first point of interconnection with the California Balancing Authority. My question is, does nearby include some of the generation capacity in places like Arizona, Oregon, Washington, or British Columbia?
Ms. Skinner.
The interconnection would include Arizona and Nevada, for sure, but the representation of the final, there are tiered obligations in terms of that interconnection. The first compliance period is 50%, the second is 65%, and the third is 75% with the ability to go to 65 if there's any problem with the availability of the resource or the availability of transmission.
Thank you. I'm struggling to discern the answer to my specific question. Perhaps it can be addressed and closed. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very concerned about the constant push in this body to increase the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, for electricity generated within the state of California. Mostly because as we continue to push to increase this standard, which I believe arbitrarily excludes hydroelectric capacity above 50 megawatts as well as nuclear power, as we continue to press forward, what we're doing is constantly increasing the cost of electricity to California consumers, California business, and California manufacturers. The sad fact is that in the lower 48, California has the highest electrical costs in the nation. This measure would likely increase those costs another 30%. Now, members, think to yourself, as we go out and we interact with our constituents, how many of your constituents would know and would appreciate and approve of the fact that if you vote for SB 722, you are voting to increase their electrical rates at least 30%? Think of the implications that has on energy-intensive manufacturing in the state of California. Now, just 2 weeks ago, we heard from the Premier of British Columbia, who addressed us about providing California with more clean, green hydroelectric power. In fact, he aims to make British Columbia the, quote, Saudi Arabia of clean, green hydropower. Problem with that is that people in British Columbia don't appreciate being used as an energy colony for California. And furthermore, you may not know this, but the state-owned enterprise, BC Power, has actually imported power for 10 of the last 11 years to make up a power deficit. The power that they've imported is rather curious in its origin. It's coal and gas-powered power from Alberta and the state of Washington. And so what's been occurring in British Columbia is what I deem electron laundering. They're selling us clean green electrons at a markup and backfilling it with cheap electrons generated from coal. Now,
30 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is already going on in California to meet our RPS standard. I don't believe this measure addresses that adequately. We do not want to impoverish ourselves and allow other states and even other countries to make a profit by repurposing electrons that were impelled into the grid by coal-fired power. I would urge a no vote.
Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, I move to close debate.
Second, please. Moving the previous question to take 5 minutes.
You're moving the previous question, Mr. Calderon? Moving the previous question. It takes 5 members who did not speak on the motion. Mr. Hall, Ms. Evans, Mr. Gatto, Mr. De Leon, and Mr. Monning. Okay. It takes a majority of those present and voting. It's not debatable. Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 25. Motion carries. Floor manager can close. Ms. Skinner.
Thank you. I ask for an aye vote and for immediate transmittal to the Senate.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 25. Measure passes. Without reference to file, AB 2376, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2376 by Assembly Member Huffman and Act relating to Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, Ms. Skinner asks for immediate transmittal of SB 722 to the Senate. Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill calls on the Natural Resources Agency to convene a cabinet-level committee to develop a strategic vision to reform the Department of Fish and Game and the Fish and Game Commission, and to bring that vision back to the legislature and the governor. This will help us achieve our 21st century resource challenges through this important agency. It's supported by a broad group of environmental and fishing and hunting stakeholders, and I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Gentlemen of the Assembly, this is utterly unnecessary and, I would argue, cumbersome. More and more studies. We already have a Delta plan that's coming together, and that's going to cost $16 million. I would argue that this would emulate that cost of the state of California if you just take a look at what's going to be required here. The committee must develop and submit to the governor by July 1st, 2012, a list of A through N, and Section I has one subsection under it, all of these various and sundry things. It, in addition, allows the appointment of different committees and consultants. Consultants do cost a lot of money. In fact, it's a game in most agencies, the consultant money game, the cash cow of state government. Agency upon agency, here's yet another one. And again, remember, we're doing more and more and more studying. Then there can be the appointment of a blue ribbon or citizens commission or advisory committee or task force or any other group deemed necessary. So now we can have all these subgroups that will meet. Certainly this will be a very expeditious process. And it's of some interest, many people have forgotten this, but in the Wilson administration, strategic plans were exhaustively developed by all of the agencies. This particular agency, I believe, was developed in 1998. So they already have a plan, but we're going to have another plan. Layers and layers upon government, ladies and gentlemen. What more inopportune time to be considering something like this? We're dithering around, not yet getting a budget done, yet we are considering here expanding the responsibilities of the agencies of government, exacerbating those costs. This is not necessary. It is worthy of a no vote. And this particular agency is another one that's largely out of control. Up in the Siskiyous, they're going out and extorting individual landowners. Wardens going on to private property and saying, because you are a diverter, and a diverter would be one who puts a 1-inch siphon pipe in a ditch. You are a diverter. and therefore we can require you to stop diverting. If you do not do so, we can fine or imprison you, because fish are more important than your private property rights, your water. We will seize that. A 78-year-old woman was trembling in conversation with me about being told by a game warden she'd be arrested. Oh, they brought by a voluntary agreement. But if they didn't sign the voluntary agreement, they would be out of compliance, could be fined, could be imprisoned. This is the kind of an agency we're going to offer more time to study. Ladies and gentlemen, I think not. This bill is unnecessary, particularly at this time. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, I move the previous question.
Takes 5 members. Members who have not spoken: Ms. Skinner, Ms. Evans, Mr. Hall, Mr. Bradford, Mr. Gatto. Roll call vote. All members, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 24. Mr. Huffman, you may close.
Respectfully request an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Okay. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, noes 24. Senate amendments are concurred in. We're going to lift the calls. Mr. DeVore.
I rise to a parliamentary inquiry. I wish to inquire whether it is the majority's intention to continue to short-circuit the free debate in this institution this evening.
Okay, thank you, members. We're going to lift the calls. File item 43, SB 250. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 27, noes 39. Measure fails. Without reference to file, AB 2398. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 47, noes 26. Senate amendments are concurred in. Without reference to file, AB 1542. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Jones moves the call. We have any more bills? Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to adjourn.
We have a bill on call. It is not appropriate at this moment. Thank you.
Rats.
Without reference to file, AB 2670, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2670 by Assemblymember John A. Perez, an act relating to the State Capital Sustainability Task Force.
Mr. Chesbro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm presenting AB 2670 on behalf of Speaker Pettis for concurrence. This bill establishes the State Capital Sustainability Task Force to advance our environmentally friendly practices for our state capitol building. The Senate amendment specified the composition of the 6-member task force with 2 Assembly appointments, 2 Senate appointments, and an appointment each from the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. The bill will provide for having educational information here at the Capitol so our many visitors can learn ways that they can integrate environmentally friendly practices in their home, schools, and offices. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Nastandi.
Have the bills been passed out, the analysis? I don't have one. Then why are we taking up the bill if we don't have an analysis?
Mr. Calderon.
Well, can you give us a little bit of time to look at it? I mean, we're orphaning all these bills. We don't even have a bill and we're voting on it. I would request that you put the bill off and let us read the bill first, and we'll come back and vote on it. This is getting ridiculous. We're throwing all these bills out here. We're cutting off debate. We don't have time to read them. About 10 minutes. How's that? Well, come on. This is getting absurd.
Mr. Hall.
And we're making a mockery of the place by
doing it. Are we required
it.
to have an analysis?
No.
Thank you.
It can be waived by the presiding officer.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Calderon.
All right, the analysis is being passed out. Let's just continue with the bill. Pen analysis has been in the computer all along.
Yep. Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This evening we are taking up a lot of bills that are seeming to waste a lot of time, and it's important for us to have a thorough discussion on this particular bill and its importance. And,
Mr. Calderon.
And with this particular
point,
bill,
to what point is Mr. Jeffries rising?
Mr. Jeffries has risen.
Mr. Jeffries, you need to speak on the bill.
I was attempting to, Madam Speaker. As is pointed out on this particular bill, there is numerous arguments in opposition and numerous parties opposed to the bill. And I think it's important that the members of the legislature are aware of those parties that are opposed to the bill. The American Forest and Paper Association is opposed to the bill, as well as the American Council of Engineers. These particular parties are important to the business of California, as well as the Business Owners and Managers Association of California.
Mr. Calderon.
Is this on the bill? Mr. Jeffries' comments on the bill?
Mr. Jeffries.
All right. His comments are on the bill. I'll move the previous question.
Mr. Adams.
Madam Chair, I would like to inquire as a point of information whether or not Mr. Jeffries' time is being precluded by Mr. Calderon's interruption of that time, and I was hoping to ensure that Mr. Jeffries' full time would be consumed before Mr. Calderon's motion may be taken in order.
We've stopped the clock, even during your comments. Mr. Jeffries, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The parties that are opposed to this particular bill in California also relate to the California Business Properties Association. Some of the arguments that are spelled out specifically related to this bill is that it's inappropriate to statutorily change the task force which is integrating this particular sustainable practice, such as double-sided copying. Statutes are no place for micromanagement. I'm of the opinion, members, many of the objectives contained in the bill are already being pursued. In particular, they're already in the waste division requirement and restrictions on the disposable of electronic waste. The state has already been purchasing vehicles with improved fuel economy and even hybrids. Madam Speaker, I think this points to the challenges incorporated with such a bill that make it difficult for any member here this evening to support a bill such as this, despite my colleagues' best efforts to constantly delay. Members, do we really want to diversify fuel types of our vehicle fleet? I think not. I think it's important that we do not do that. Other state agencies have tried to diversify their fleets by purchasing more expensive flex fuel vehicles. Flex fuel vehicles are, as you know, are very valuable for the state of California and its transportation needs. And as such...
Are you speaking to the bill?
Yes, it's absolutely germane in many ways to the bill, thereby defeating the purpose of purchasing flex fuel vehicles.
10 seconds.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It would likely be less expensive to focus investment in a single fuel vehicle rather than forcing the state to purchase many different types of fuels. Do we need a statute to incorporate such photovoltaic type technologies in our state capital energy supply? I think not.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Hall.
Madam Speaker, I move the previous question.
Takes 5 members who haven't spoken on this. Ms. Evans, Mr. Ramiano, Mr. Calderon, Mr. De Leon, Mr. Gatto. Yes, 5 members. All those in favor of closing the debate signify by the sign of aye. All those opposed? Roll call vote. Roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Hall's asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman's asking for a no vote. Majority of those present and voting. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 26. Mr. Chesbro, you may close.
I ask for your aye vote on greening the Capitol.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, noes 24. Measure passes. I plan to lift the call after midnight. It's got an urgency.
Is that third time?
Yeah. Without reference to file, AB 1413, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1413 by Assemblymember Fuentes, an act relating to student financial aid.
Mr. Cotto, Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate amendments deleted the contents of this bill and inserted language allowing students that meet the in-state tuition requirements to apply for and participate in any student financial aid program administered by the state of California. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Hall.
I move to close debate.
Second.
Mr. Hall.
I move the previous question.
It takes 5 who hasn't spoken. Ms. Evans, Mr. Ramiano, Ms. Lowenthal, Mr. DeLeon, Mr. Ruskin. All those in favor, we'll just open up the call. Clerk will post. Mr. Hall, open the roll. Open the roll. Mr. Hall asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 24. Mr. Fuentes, you may close. Mr. Fuentes asked for an aye vote.
Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 27. Measure passes.
You can't take them up at all?
Under the Constitution, we cannot take any bills that have an urgency or take effect immediately. Mr. Jones' bill is on call, and it has an urgency, so we can lift the call. We're going to lift the call on AB 1542. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 16. Measure fails. Mr. Jones notices reconsideration. Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to read briefly.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, in the Constitution, it states no bill may be passed by either House on or after September 1st of an even-numbered year except statutes calling elections, statutes providing for tax levies or appropriations for the usual current expenses of the state, and urgency statutes and bills passed after being vetoed by the governor. I move to adjourn.
Well, if you want to get technical, you spoke, and so you can't make the motion. So someone else needs to make the motion.
I have lots of friends, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Anderson makes the motion. Needs to be seconded. Mr. Hagman seconds. Mr. Speaker.
Give me one more minute, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I want to thank you for your hard work this session. Over the past 2 years that we've had the privilege of serving together in the interest of the people of California, we've served in momentous period of struggle for our state. For those departing members whose final term has overlapped with my first term, I want to thank you for your dedication and your service. And I genuinely believe that despite the challenges we've faced, we've begun the hard work of healing our state. And in essence, it comes down to the amount of respect that we show for each other in our efforts to serve the interests of the people of California. Obviously, we don't always agree on policy, but I'm proud of the fact that our disagreements are dissipated in a respectful manner. This was vividly on display this morning as both Democratic and Republican members rose to make eloquent, principled arguments on behalf of our budget plans. And in particular, I want to thank the members who will be leaving our House after their service. And I'd like to call them individually Mr. Adams, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Arambula, Speaker Bass, Mr. Berryhill. Obviously, Senator Blakesley has already moved to the Senate. Ms. Caballero, Mr. Cotto, Mr. Delatorre, Mr. De Leon, Mr. DeVore, Senator Emerson, Ms. Evans, Dr. Fuller, Mr. Gilmore, Dr. Hernandez, Mr. Jones, Colonel Liu, Mr. Nava, Mr. Nilo, Mr. Ruskin, Ms. Salas, Ms. Saldana, Ms. Strickland, Mr. Torlakson, Mr. Tirico, Mr. Tran, and Mr. Valines. We all appreciate your incredible service to this institution and to the people of California. And to the members returning next year, I want to say how grateful I am for the opportunity to continue to work with you as we serve the people of the state. And I'm looking forward to the next legislative session where we can continue the progress that we've made in putting California back on a pathway to prosperity. In the last few months, we've come together to unanimously approve measures to stimulate growth in the green economy and in the housing industry, and we continue the difficult, urgent work next year that is so important to rebuilding our economy. Speaker Bass, I can't tell you how grateful I am for your friendship, your wise counsel, and your leadership over the last 2 years. You've kept our state afloat during the most difficult period since the Great Depression. And I know I speak for the entire chamber when I say how much we'll miss your presence here on the floor and how lucky we feel that Speaker Pelosi will be to have you in the Congress in the coming year. I also want to thank Republican Leader Garrick for his partnership as we've tried to work together in the service of our state. Finally, I want to express my sincere thanks to the staff who've been with us day in and day out. I want to commend our schedulers and our ledge aides who've been invaluable in steering us through these difficult times as well. But I think too often we fail to thank the other folks who help make this institution run, our sergeants, our DGS support staff, the special services, the floor unit, reprographics, LDC, the Rules Committee staff, Ledge Council, all our floor staff, the CHP as they've given up their nights and weekends to be with us as we serve in the interest of the people of California. We are truly a family as we try to come together and work under this dome, and I want to thank you all for your work. This has been a challenging but productive year. Dangling participles notwithstanding, and we have much to be proud of. We have more work to do in passing the budget that reflects the values and priorities of Californians. We will be reconvening as a body as soon as we've reached an agreement that balances the budget and reflects the values and priorities of the state of California. And as we work forward, many of you will be back in the intervening days, and hopefully just days, not weeks, as we craft that collective agreement on our budget. We have much work to do, but I want to thank you all and let you know how proud I am of what we're able to do together. I hope that you all enjoy a good Labor Day with your families. Thank you, members.
Mr. Nielsen?
Madam Speaker, if I may, an acknowledgement of the Speaker and his predecessors, Speaker Bass, our Republican leaders that we've been along with these last couple of years, Assemblyman Valines, Assemblyman Blakesley, Assemblyman Garrick. And Mr. Speaker, I particularly want to thank you as being one who came to an institution that had changed rather significantly from my former experience, and how you have devoted yourself, and Speaker Bass did too as last year, for meaningful conference committees. So there was public input instead of so much backroom dealing. And the Speaker's desire to have less done in the Big Five than had come to be a custom around here. The bills have moved with dispatch through the committees and to the floor. We've had fewer marathons, and your fastidious attention to that has been noted. Most of the time, speakers do not preside. You've come here even to convene us in session and encourage us to show up to get us into better habits. That is all for the good of the institution, Mr. Speaker, and at a time when the institution has deteriorated, I think, far too significantly. Such conduct inures to our benefit as an institution, as members of the institution, and could show in the eyes of the public this place can work. I thank you for your good service.
Mr. Tirico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know it's late, but I just wanted to rise and thank all of you for being great colleagues and for a great experience over the last 6 years. But I do want to take this moment to thank Speaker Bass, who I had the honor and privilege of serving with for 6 years, and who I had an honor and privilege of serving as her majority leader. She entrusted me with that position. And as I said when we swore her in, when I nominated her to be the Speaker, she was uniquely positioned to lead this state with grace, to lead this state with dignity, and to bring back and to start to build back up the respect of this business of public service. It was a great honor for me to serve with Speaker Bass, and I just wanted to thank you for your service and wish you nothing but the best in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Ms. Bass?
Let me just say to everyone here, it has been an incredible experience over these last 6 years. I remember when I first came to the Assembly and I was listening to members who were terming out, and they were saying that in your time here you will meet people and you will make friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. And I think that we have been through an incredible experience over these last 6 years, and I have appreciated working with each and every one of you. I will miss everyone here, but I do look forward to the time when you come to Washington, D.C., and we can all work together to make sure that we bring the resources that we need from D.C. to California. And let me just take a moment to say that I really appreciated the time that I served with Assembly Leader Mike Valines and Sam Blakesley, and for a hot minute with Martin Garrick. And how hot was that minute? No, that's between the two of us. No, I appreciated my opportunity to work with each and every one of you. And to Speaker Perez, who is a dear friend, and I believe is going to be and has been already a wonderful leader of this House. I look forward to continuing to find ways to be supportive of your leadership, and for the members here, anything that I can do in the future to make sure that we can improve our state, know that I'll always be there, whether it's here or whether it's on the East. Thank you.
Mr. Valines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to thank my staff for my 6 years. I also want to recognize the 81st Assembly member, Ivan Altamura.
Mr. Davis.
Madam Speaker and members, I just wanted to also wish former Speaker Karen Bass, Speaker Emeritus, who was my seatmate as well. I know she will continue to do an outstanding job. She made a historic position here as the first woman and African American woman to be our speaker, and we continue to be proud of her, and I know I will see a lot of her in Washington. And additionally, I look forward to working and making a more significant contribution in the new year with our new speaker, John Perez, as we move forward. And finally, I would like to say there's another woman in this House that many of you know. When I first came here in 2006, she was the Democratic Caucus chairwoman of the State Assembly here, and she went on to become the budget chair under Karen Bass, and now she's the majority whip. And so Noreen Evans was a woman that I could always count on to tell me which way the wind was blowing in leadership. I truly will miss her, because whenever there was a move that was not obvious, Noreen would let me know. And I am eternally grateful to all that she has done, and she is an example of women in leadership in our institution, and I think we should give her a round of applause.
Ms. Bass.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to ask to speak again, but please let me not neglect to mention a person who has helped me through these last 6 years, my Chief of Staff, Nolise Edwards, who is way more than a Chief of Staff, but also a dear friend. Nolise Edwards.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you. I'm going to make this really brief. I just want to take a little time to thank our Speaker Emeritus, Karen Bass. Our first year in the Assembly was very chaotic. Those of you that are freshmen like me, we went through 3 budgets, a lot of late nights and a lot of negotiations. She always handled herself very well, very professionally. I look forward to the same under Speaker Perez. And I also want to thank Mary Salas for her introductions and some of the things she's done for me with regard to the San Diego. There's a different relationship in San Diego. They actually work together, and Republicans and Democrats, to get things done for the county. And I think that's very admirable. We've seen that with Denise Ducheney and also here with Mary Salas. So we will miss her. And my friend over there, buttoning himself up. There you go, Joel. Joel, we'll see you over in the Senate. Very happy to keep you around. And Mike Valines, former leader, I want to thank you too. You have always, always kept that smile, kept that lilt. Didn't matter how bad it was, how dire it was, you always kept us informed too. We knew what plank we were jumping off with you. You kept everyone informed. There were no secrets, and I appreciate that. That first year, it was very, very important to know who to trust, who was going to give you the inside scoop, and what you could do and what you couldn't do. And you always kept us informed. So as we go forward with Martin, I think that you set a good precedent for us, and I really, really appreciate my time spent with you. Wish you all the luck in the world. And all of you, good night and have a great break, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Mr. Swanson.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I wanted to say that to our Speaker Emeritus Bass, that in public life, we try to make a difference. And the leadership that you've shown over the years for foster children in this state has made a very specific difference to all of those children. And I think that our greatest compliment as legislators is that question, have we made a difference? And now you are going off to serve the people of the state of California, United States Congress. I've had the pleasure to work for members of Congress for over 30 years, and you're going to be an outstanding member of the United States Congress. And so, my hat goes off to you. And finally, let me just say, and I don't see my friend on the floor now, but to a friend of mine that's been, who I've known for a number of years, Joe Cotto, who is leaving this House. He has been He's talking to Mr. Portantino right now, but so watch your pockets, Joe. But Joe Cotto has been a true statesman in this House, and he has mentored me in a lot of ways, and I appreciate those quiet moments of advice, and we're going to miss you here, my brother, and I don't know how you continue to look so good, but thank you for all your support, and I wish you success in your future endeavors. My brother, Joe Cotto.
Mr. Anderson?
You know, so often we get caught up in the motions of this, and we're focused on bills, and we're focused on moving the agenda. But I got to tell you, when I got sworn in, we didn't have, we were told that we could bring one person on the floor. And Fabian Nunes, our speaker, allowed me to bring my whole family. Later, I had my family come up. I'm the youngest of 8. We have quite a little crowd. And Speaker Bass was kind enough to accommodate my family. Again, just in the last couple of days, you saw my niece here, and Speaker Perez. The one thing that I'm going to take away from this experience is it's always been about friends. It's always been about family. It's always been about taking care of each other. You know, when I've had guests on the floor, so many of you have taken time to walk across. You may not walk across to talk to me about a bill, but you certainly came over to introduce yourself to my family and my relatives, and I just can't tell you how much that meant to me and how much I appreciate it. I also have been very privileged. I served under three great leaders. And Mike Valines, certainly you set the bar awfully high, and Sam Blakesley reached it, and Martin Garrick is right there too, and that's been a real privilege. Now, I probably shouldn't share this, but Mike was my roommate, Ivan was my roommate, and Anthony's my roommate. And of all the roommates, Anthony's the most fun. So, thank you all. I deeply appreciate serving with you.
Mr. Silva.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to say a couple words about Fiona Ma. I think that she's a fantastic leader. We get through our daily business in good shape, and I appreciate what you've done for us. Thank you. My first day up here, we were attending meetings, and I sat next to this new member, not realizing that this member would probably become my best friend up here. She's extremely smart. I've been in public office for 25 years. I don't think I've ever served with anyone as intelligent as she is. I think she served her students very well. I think that she served her community very well. I think she served this body very well. And she's also done, I think, a good job for the citizens, all the citizens of California. And I'm talking about Jean Fuller. Jean, you're special, and I'm very fortunate to consider you to be one of my best friends. Thank you.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I have some further business to do, but what I wanted to do first was to mention how grateful I am for the job that our Speaker has done. When I nominated him for Speaker, I remember I went through a list of character traits, and he's lived up to every one of them. It's not easy running this House. I guarantee you it's not easy running this House. But he has done an excellent job, and we forget, he's only a freshman. He's certainly more than that, but he's a freshman. This is the first year or term that he's been up here. I think he's done an excellent job at managing this House, in dealing with the governor, and keeping us on track, being fair to our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, and trying to help every member as best he can accomplish their agenda and meet the reasons for which they came up here in the first place. So I want to thank our Speaker for doing a great job. And now I'd like to request unanimous consent, to withdraw the motion to adjourn. With Mr. Anderson's consent, of course.
With the consent of Mr. Anderson.
Now, there are a number of letters to the journal. There are ones to which there are Republican objections and others to which there are not. An A roll call, if you will, and a B roll call. The clerk has the A roll call. I'd like him to read that first and then ask unanimous consent to allow those files to be submitted to the desk.
Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 759, Assembly Bill 827, Assembly Bill 1106, Assembly Bill 1723, Assembly Bill 1911, Assembly Bill 2092, Assembly Bill 2147, Assembly Bill 2151, Assembly Bill 2212, Assembly Bill 2408, Assembly Bill 2432, and Assembly Bill 2446.
Request unanimous consent for permission to add those letters to the journal.
Without objection.
And now, clerk, if you would read the B list.
Clerk to read.
Assembly Bill 471, Assembly Bill 2531, Assembly Bill 2554, and Assembly Bill 1405.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've yet to win one of these motions yet, but we keep doing them. Will you ask a roll call vote on those letters, please?
Okay, good. Majority of those present and voting. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 39, noes 25. Motion carries. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I move that the Assembly adjourn upon call of the Speaker.
Is there a second? Mr. Hagman seconds. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Quorum call is lifted. Continue all motions.
How to do Brownlee, item 23, AB 2567, aye to not voting.
Brownlee, Assembly Bill 2567, aye to not voting.
Gatto, sequence 108, file without reference to file, bill AB 1413, changing my vote from aye to no. Gatto, sequence 109, file without reference to file, bill AB 1413. Okay. All right.
Gatto, Assembly Bill 1413, aye to no.
Okay, so that was on the motion on 1413. So that was sequence 108. Correct. I'm going to do both.
Gatto, motion to move to previous question. Assembly Bill 1413, aye to no.
Okay, and this is Gatto.